Yesterday was very significant in the United States as hundreds of people attended the funeral for the black teenager killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri. Mourners at the Friendly Temple Baptist Church in St. Louis sang, prayed, and remembered the life of Michael Brown. Now, besides the church gathering, crowds also gathered outside of the White House to hold a candle-lit vigil in memory of the Ferguson shooting victim, whose funeral was also held the same day.
That Michael Brown does not want to be remembered for a riot. He wants to be remembered as the one that made America deal with how we gonna police in the United States. God will make a way for his children. I've been to the end of the book. Justice is gonna come. Justice is gonna come. Justice gonna come.
Well, I'm now being joined now by the Voice of America's Alberto Pimenta, who attended the service at Ferguson, Missouri, and is still there. Alberto, thank you so much for joining us on The World Today. Now, based on the visuals that we have and that what we've seen, we saw that it was a very emotional service and people are still crying for justice for the deceased. Could you give us an idea of the highlights of what happened yesterday?
Well, the first thing we saw when we got there is that there were thousands of people outside the church waiting to get in, waiting to get a spot inside that church to be part of this last goodbye to Michael Brown. A lot of the people that we saw, a lot of the people that we talked to had to stay outside because there was just not enough room for all the people that went in. Then we also saw the Brown family coming in. We saw Michael Brown's mother, and a lot of the people, when she was going into the church, shouted at her, saying, "We love you," saying different things. And then inside the church itself, during the funeral, we heard a lot of testimonies from different people, from different members of the Brown family, and they mentioned that Brown once told them that he wanted his name to be known all around the world, and they also mentioned that this was some kind of a prophecy because his name is now all around the world.
So now I'd like to ask you, Alberto, what is the mood now that he's been laid to rest? What's the mood now in Ferguson? Are there still protests, or is there now relative calm?
Well, as you can see, we're standing in a spot right now where about a week ago, during nighttime, this would have been completely impossible. This is exactly the spot where the protesters and the police clashed during those 2 nights where the protests were the most intense. So doing this from here would have been completely impossible. But as you can see right now, it's completely calm. There's just, people trying to go about their lives. People going to the supermarket, people going to the pharmacy. It's completely calm here, the police presence. We've seen about 1 police officer today, nothing like last week. We haven't seen these armored vehicles that were also here in Ferguson last week. We haven't seen that either, so it's very calm. But the people that we talked to have also mentioned that even though the situation, it's a lot quieter now, that doesn't mean that they're going to forget. About a block away from where I am, there's still people that are staying in tents that are still there and saying that they will not forget what happened here. Talking to the community itself all around Ferguson, they say that they won't forget. They want to wait what's going to happen with the investigation, but they do want justice.
You just mentioned investigation. I was just going to ask you now about what's happening concerning the investigation. You explained to us yesterday that there are 2 types of investigations going on, federal and state, I believe. So what's happening concerning these investigations?
That's right. Well, these investigations are still happening at the moment. Earlier today, we were at the exact spot where Michael Brown was shot, and we saw about 4 different, some type of police and law enforcement officers that were knocking on each door. So this is a sign, obviously, that there's law enforcement that is still knocking on doors around the area where Michael Brown was shot in order to figure out what really happened, to get all the facts so they can be used in these investigations. We do not know if they were with the federal government. We do not know if they were with the Department of Justice, the FBI, or the local authorities. But what that showed is that there's still people the authorities are still trying to figure out what happened. And as you mentioned, there's two investigations, one federal, one local. The community, again, I asked a lot of people today, and they still do not trust the local authorities. They do not trust that investigation. All their trust is in the federal investigation that is being carried by the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Alberto, we certainly hope that justice is served at the end of the day. Thank you so much for joining us on The World today. I've been speaking with Alberto Pimienta. He's with the Voice of America, and he is reporting live from Ferguson, Missouri. Thank you very much. Now, in other news, Mother Nature is doing her thing again, and this time around it's in Iceland, where the Bardarbunga volcano was hit by a 5.7 magnitude earthquake this morning, and it is by far the largest since tremors began in the area last week. The country's Met Office said despite the shock, which is the 4th magnitude 5 quake in 48 hours, there is still no sign of a volcanic eruption. On Sunday, Iceland lowered the aviation risk to its second highest level. Iceland's volcano erupted back in 2010, producing ash that erupted air travel across Europe. Now, this is a different range compared to what happened last year, or 4 years ago, but the intense seismic activity has raised fears that an eruption could cause similar travel chaos. Well, if you do the time, you'd best be prepared to do the time. The Vatican has decided to strip the former papal envoy to the Dominican Republic of his diplomatic immunity, opening the way for him to be extradited to face sex abuse allegations in the country. The Polish priest was found guilty of sexually abusing young Dominican boys by the Vatican in June. Now, what we understand is that the Caribbean state was unhappy at his immediate recalling by the church when the claims first surfaced. He is the most senior Vatican official to be investigated for sex abuse. Pope Francis has pledged a crackdown on clerics and employees of the church who exploit minors, comparing their actions to a satanic mass. The priest in question had served as ambassador to the Dominican Republic for 5 years. When we come back on The World